My name is Dzadagu. I welcome you individually and communally to this talk that I'm going to give on the late Archbishop Patrick Fani Chakaipa, who passed away in the early hours of Tuesday, the 8th of April 2003. The talk is based on a book I recently wrote about him entitled "Now That the Dust Has Cleared, Who Was Archbishop Patrick Fani Chakaipa?" And if you perhaps can get a glimpse of the front cover here, you can see that image. Now, in the first place, by way of introduction, every family has a hero or a set of heroes. That individual or individuals whom the rest of the family look up to. That individual or set of individuals who are sources of inspiration. An individual or individuals who challenge the rest of the family to raise their standards. Now, just as a family has a hero or its heroes, a local community too has got its heroes. So too does a nation. That is why, for instance, in Zimbabwe, there is the shrine we call the National Heroes Acre, where heroes of the Liberation War and also people who excelled in other fields have been laid to rest. Having looked at these levels of humanity, the family, the local community, the nation, where there are heroes, we can also apply that same notion to the church, the Catholic Church. It also has its heroes, and the widely recognized heroes within the church are those referred to as saints. However, I've got there is one major question that arises when one thinks in terms of saints in the Catholic Church, that the majority of them that come into one's eyes when one looks at church records appear to be those who are Eurogenic, those of European root. So, for instance, you get the St. Ignatiuses, the St. Francis of Assisi, you get St. Agnes, St. Alois, you get St. Teresa of Lisieux, St. Teresa of Avila, and so on. The list is endless. The question then is, where are the African heroes of the church, the Catholic Church? Is it that we don't have any such, or perhaps there is nobody who has written about them? I believe it is the latter. That yes, we have heroes within our local African and Zimbabwean Catholic Church, but just that nobody has written about them. Who is going to write about them? They could be lay people, they could be nuns, they could be priests, they could be bishops who have really excelled in their ministry, in their vocations. But after they've been buried, they are forgotten about. I have set out to write about the late Archbishop Chakaipa, looking at him as a hero of the local Catholic Church in Zimbabwe. He is a person I first got to know when I was at the age of 5 years. And I went on to closely interact with him till he passed away in 2003. Now, why do I regard Archbishop Chakaipa as a hero to the extent of writing a book about him? I regard him as a hero for various reasons. First and foremost, within the Catholic Church in Zimbabwe, Archbishop Chakaipa's name is synonymous with the policy and practice of self-reliance. Why does that make him a hero? In my view, it makes him a hero when I consider the context within which he brought this principle into reality, into practice. He became a priest and a bishop when Zimbabwe was still under colonial rule. And that was a time when he was surrounded by missionaries from European countries who were of the mentality that the African person, the local African person, could not do anything for themselves. They needed to be spoon-fed. They needed to be looked after. And so, when it came to church building, for instance, the missionary would look after everything. Source the bricks, source the cement, source the sand, and source the funds for the construction and for the roofing material and so on from his friends and family in Europe. When it came to the provision of transport for the priest, the missionary looked after himself, again from support from home abroad in Europe. In terms of his own accommodation, in terms of his own food, in terms of his own clothing, again, it was provided from abroad. Now, it didn't just end there. The priest, the missionary, also went beyond onto looking after the local people, providing them with food, providing them with clothing, and so on. So that meant the local person became totally dependent on the missionary. And this kind of mindset was in keeping with the kind of mentality of David Livingstone and Cecil John Rhodes, for whom Africans were childlike. No matter what actual age they reached, they remained children because they could not think for themselves, they could not organize themselves. And there were many instances people experienced where priests of European origin refused offertory collection from the local people and returned it to them, telling the local congregation, rather than looking after him, the missionary, he should be looking after them because they were helpless. Now, it is within that context that Archbishop Chakaipa acquired or achieved his heroism, because he turned that whole mentality in the Archdiocese of Harare around. He inspired a sense of self-confidence in the local people to say, even if they were capable of doing some small level kind of work and provision for their priest, or constructing some structure for their church for worship and so on, that was good enough as long as they took pride in having done something for themselves. Now, because he worked hard on engendering that self-confidence, today the Archdiocese of Harare boasts many parishes which have built their own churches, parishes which can look after their priests. They have built accommodation for their priests, they provide food for their priests, they provide clothing for their priests, they provide transport for their priests. This was a real revolution that Archbishop Chakaipa brought about. And today, even those fellow priests and perhaps lay people who despised him are beginning to emulate him, and his approach is beginning to be emulated across the country. Not only did Archbishop work towards providing for the church during his time, but he also made sure that the future church and his successor would be well provided for. For instance, there is a huge complex of building that he put up, office space that can be leased to different organizations, legal practitioners, restaurants, colleges, are leasing out those buildings and paying revenue to the Archdiocese of Harare, so that his successor does not have to worry about income to sustain those offices, maintain those offices, and even sustain employees. Now, Archbishop Chakaipa went even beyond just implementing that policy for the Archdiocese of Harare. The ZCBC itself has Archbishop Chakaipa to thank, because he made sure that the Africa Synod House, in which it operates, it holds its meetings, has also separate space that is leased out to different organizations who can use it and also pay monthly rentals and revenue to the conference, to the ZCBC, and thus they do not have to worry about how to pay their employees, their staff. So that way, Archbishop Chakaipa once again is a hero in my eyes, and I'm very convinced in the eyes of thousands of others. Besides that, many people today take it for granted that the ZCBC has got African Secretary Generals, and that has been so for some years now. And yet this only came about because of Archbishop Chakaipa, who had the vision that there needed to be an African person who stood as the face of the ZCBC before the country and before the world. He worked hard towards bringing about that kind of reality. There were individual members of the church, including in the hierarchy, who would have been undermined by missionaries from Europe. For instance, at one time, Bishop Chiginya of the then Gweru Diocese. It was only Archbishop Chakaipa who was able to assist him and organize a strategy to counteract that sort of ploy or plan by some sections within the missionary community to try and undermine Bishop Chiginya. Archbishop Chakaipa was not just concerned about the Archdiocese of Harare, but the whole wider church in Zimbabwe. Many millions of people in Zimbabwe, I can safely say, pride themselves in having gone to a church school. And they feel very proud that their children have also gone to church schools. But it turns out we owe this debt of gratitude to Archbishop Chakaipa. Anybody who has been to a church school or has had a child who has gone to a church school since 1980,